Hi, I'm Stuart. Welcome to my YouTube channel, or welcome back. Thanks for viewing my video. In this video, I am going to do Booktubers Have a Purpose? The Booktuber Role Tag. I was tagged in a video by Suey at Suey's Book Banter. I also watched a video by Pat at Book Chat with Pat, 8668, where she did this tag. First, Suey. Here's a great booktube tag. Created by Allison annotated, reflecting on our role as booktubers. Such fun questions to think about. I need more people to answer this one, so I'm tagging a bunch of you. Be sure to watch Allison's original video, and I will include her original video. There are 7 prompts in this tag, and unlike most of the times I do tags, I didn't think of my answers ahead of time, so I'm thinking of them as I go along. But if something takes me a while to think about and come up with the answer, I'm certainly not going to just let the camera run and have a lot of silent space of me doing that. But I am doing this kind of on the fly. The first prompt is, how do you view your role as a booktuber? Examples might be as a critic, a curator, an influencer, an entertainer, an educator, etc. I wouldn't view myself as a critic. I don't think that I'm critical enough to be viewed that way. I like most of what I read. I think that to be a good critic, you just have to, you basically can't, you have to like less books than I like, actually. I tend to like most of the books I read. So I wouldn't consider myself a critic. And I wouldn't consider myself an influencer. I like a distinction many make that between content creators and influencers. I would not consider myself an influencer. I consider myself a content creator. Wouldn't really consider myself a curator either. I do hope I do provide some entertainment value in my videos, that people just enjoy watching them. I mostly talk about books, but I do talk about some other aspects of my life too. What I'd really like to consider myself is someone who, I talk about various books, I talk about the books I read, and what I like to think of my role is that I expose people to the books I read, and what I say about them, I do try to do individual book reviews. I did look at the video of Allison annotated, and I did see that her video is a response video to the question of, our book reviews dead? I do try to do individual book reviews, and when I do so, I give a setup for the book, but then I mention positives, negative of the books. I give content warnings. I like to think I provide enough information that, especially people who know me and know my tastes, and hopefully their tastes in some ways align, can determine whether they might want to look into the book and possibly read it. I like to think that's kind of my role, providing enough information so that a person can decide whether or not they want to at least look into the book more. It might not have been on their radar before, or if it was, they hadn't really considered reading it. The second prompt is, do you have any educational background in literature or literary criticism, either formal or self-directed? And if you are comfortable sharing, do you have any other education or professional experience that you bring to bear on your reviews? I don't have any educational background in literature or literary criticism. My degree was in electrical engineering, and The only English class we had to take was first semester freshman year, so I do not have any experience in college English beyond that. I do have some experience, though, that can come to bear in some ways, and that is I spent around 25 years of my working career as a technical writer, actually at a aircraft parts manufacturing company. And the experience that brings to me is it's certainly a different type of writing than writing novels, but you do have to use proper grammar, you do have to use proper spelling, you do have to get the information you need to impart across. So I think that does provide some, does add something that I bring to bear to the book reviews I do. As a technical writer, you have to explain things clearly, and if I say a book is confusing, another thing that is that my background as an engineer, technical writer, you have to do a lot of research and research things in depth. You have to understand things logically and stuff like that. I think that when I talk about whether a book is confusing or not, my experience as a technical writer can come to bear. And when I talk about, and say, a hard sci-fi novel, what I think about what they talk about there, my experience can come to bear there. Not that I read many hard sci-fi novels, but so my background as a technical writer and engineer can come to bear a little bit in my reviews. The third prompt is, do you typically do any research on either the book or the author before you review a book? Beyond sometimes looking back at something in the book that I read, I don't do any research. I don't tend to take notes. I don't even often tab things to look back at them later. I sometimes will look at the synopsis if I feel I need to be reminded of something, but I don't base my review on the synopsis. I don't research the author. As a matter of fact, I think that kind of a shortcoming in my reading is that I don't know authors in the same way I know people in other entertainment spheres, such as musicians, bands, or athletes, or people of that nature. I'm not sure why. I almost feel guilty admitting it, that I don't follow that many authors on social media. I follow way more entertainers and athletes. And yet, at this time, reading is my number one hobby. I feel a little guilty that I'm not more interested in the history of authors, where they're coming from. But I just don't. I mean, the really famous ones, just by watching a lot of booktubers, I learn about them, but I don't really do my own research. It's rare that I would do that. There is maybe 10, 12 authors I do follow on Instagram, but there's not that many. The fourth prompt is, do you focus your reviews more on the objective qualities of a book or more on your subjective opinions about it? Well, when I do my reviews, often I start by saying the type of book it is, and then I talk about the early part of the book enough to explain the setup, the main characters, what's going on. And then I reach a point where I've introduced the book, and I generally say, and the story goes from there. Then I talk about things I liked about the book. I talk about things that people need to be warned about, content warnings. when I talk about what I like about the book, that is where it becomes subjective. I would never, as I said above, I never would say I'm a critic. My views of the book are basically how it makes me feel. So if I'm really happy about reading the book, or even if it affects me in some way strongly, in a positive way, I'll rate it highly. And I do give star ratings too. I know in a lot of ways they don't have a lot of value, but I review my book. In addition to YouTube, I review my books on Storygraph and Fable, and they have star ratings, so I do star ratings. But my view of the book is subjective. And one thing I won't do is, like, say I read a classic book, and understandably the social mores are different. But if what's in the book I don't like it, I will say it. To me, it doesn't matter if it's a different time. I feel a certain way about it, I'm going to. Like, there's a lot of things in classic books. There's classism, there's misogyny, there's racism, homophobia, and stuff like that. And even though I know that they were of their time, well, they're kind of our time again, but that's another matter. But even though they were prevalent at those times, I am going to mention it, and certainly a professional critic wouldn't do that. So that's where it's subjective for me, what I think of a book. Do I like it or not, and how much, and why? The fifth prompt is, have you ever received a free book or advanced reader copy from the author? And if so, did it have any impact on your ability to honestly review the book or on how you felt about it? I have not received a free copy of a book. I did not long ago create a NetGalley account. I requested a couple books, but they're pretty high profile. I didn't get either of them. I need to go back on there and just not be afraid to just request a fair amount of them. Eventually, somebody would grant their request, and perhaps look at genres I like from, say, lesser-known authors, and maybe a review of their book, a lesser-known author, would be more helpful anyway than somebody's getting a zillion reviews. If a place like NetGalley gave me a book, it wouldn't influence my review. If somebody I knew did, it might. One of the two books I requested is from a pretty popular booktuber, and despite being really popular, she often replies to my comments, and I'm really impressed by that, and I really like her videos. So I would try, if I got that book to review, to be unbiased, but I'm not sure if I think of her highly as a booktuber and a person, what I've seen. It's possible that may influence me in a review, I don't know. I have not encountered that situation yet. Suey, who tagged me in her video, this tag, so that I'm doing this tag now. She recently released her first book. I thought of requesting ARC. I was too slow in the draw, but I will read her book soon, and this question will have to come up when I review her book. It's kind of hard to be biased. It's kind of hard to be unbiased because I've gotten to know Suey for a while on her books, on her videos. So, but this question is going to be important because I like to think I can be unbiased. The problem comes in if it's easy to be unbiased if I love something, but if I don't love it, that's going to be tough. I don't know what I'm going to do. That question will be something I may have to deal with. I don't know. Again, most books I read I like. I'm certainly not, as I said above, certainly not a critic, but it is something that I am going to have to confront. And if I do actually ever reach a point where I request books directly from authors, and it's not just Suey's book, because there are 3 other people, booktubers, that I can think of that I've become friends with on here, that I have 1 or more of their books too that I'll eventually read. And I do try to review every book I read, so I'm really kind of hoping that I like those books, because I'm not sure what I'll do if I don't. I won't. Well, one thing I wouldn't do is I wouldn't say I like something I didn't, but I don't know if I just kind of not review them or what. I'm not really sure what I do in that situation. The 6th prompt is, do you review every book you read? Are there any reasons you might read a book but choose not to review it? As I said previously, I do try to review every book I read. The reason I might not, beyond maybe just giving it a star rating for my statistics in Storygraph and Fable, is that if I don't get around to it fairly soon, I don't feel that I necessarily remember it as well as I need to do to give what I consider a good book review. So sometimes that happens. That's even happened this year. There's some books that I read early in the year that haven't reviewed yet, and I'm not sure I will, because if I don't feel that I remember it enough, and it doesn't mean it's a bad book if I don't remember it enough. It's just, as time passes, I don't necessarily remember enough that I think I can give a decent review. The 7th prompt is, how do you feel about the fact that many people now primarily consume book reviews by hobbyists on BookTube rather than professional critics? For me personally, I think that the hobbyists are better for me. I think that the hobbyists are likely looking for the same things that I'm looking for in books. They aren't generally going to be judging a book on its literary merit. They're just going to be talking about things that help me identify whether I might want to read the book. And I have to admit that talk about book critics and hobbyists and stuff like that, and less and less professional book critics, makes me think back that what I read a lot more than book critics was professional music critics. Talk about albums, talk about concerts, and that's what I really enjoyed in criticism, is those critics, and also movie critics. I don't think even when there was much more professional criticism available, the paper had professional book critics. I don't think they do anymore. I didn't read those like I read music and, to a lesser extent, movie reviews. So what I think is lost is just that the professional critics they can put things in context. They can compare these things to other authors. They can talk about how maybe books have changed over the years. They can talk about things that I wouldn't expect from most hobbyists. So I think putting things in even though For me, it's not necessarily a loss. It is, I can understand how at a, say, an academic level, a certain level that wants to view books more of a, well, a critical eye, I can't think of a better word to say, than I do, that's being lost. But for me, I hate to admit it, but it really hasn't had an impact on me. And I guess another thing that's really lost is there are people that devoted their life to being professional critics, and it's professional book critics, and it's kind of a shame that it's kind of being phased out. So there are people that were really good at it, and they're just, being phased out, and so that's unfortunate. And maybe there's less and less of people like coming up with lists of great books and stuff that we can all look at and disagree with and stuff, and there are probably going to be less and less of that. I mean, people do lists, but it won't be the lists of, say, what is great literature or whatever. It won't be so much of that. One thing that Allison annotated mentioned in that is a video by BookBorn, which was what led her, she was responding to that, and I had watched that video too, and I recommend, in addition to the Allison annotated, Suey and Pat, watch BookBorn's video because she has a good nuanced take on it. So I recommend you watch all those videos too. I would be interested in knowing your thoughts on the topic. I suspect that people who are subscribing to booktubers and watching their videos are maybe mostly like me. I don't know. You're spending time watching people talk about books on here, so you're mostly, maybe completely watching hobbyists. But if you'd like to add a comment, what you think, please do so. If you can't think of anything else to comment, please add an emoji. A book or a book stack emoji would be good, or an emoji of your choice. If you like this video, please subscribe. Please hit the bell to get notified when I upload future videos.